Most men think being nice will make them lovable, that if they just give more, yield more, stay soft, patient, agreeable, eventually they'll be chosen. They confuse kindness with worth, thinking love is something they can earn by never taking up space. But what they're really doing is begging, not with words, with silence, with constant apologies that never leave their lips, with the way they disappear a little more every time there's tension, and they call it love, but it's fear, fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough. So they shrink and smile and give and wait. What they don't see is how that niceness becomes the very thing that erodes them, not because kindness is wrong, but because theirs isn't real. It's performance. It's a quiet trade, where affection is currency and self-respect is the price. You think your silence will protect the relationship. You think saying nothing will earn you peace. But what you're really teaching her is that your presence is negotiable, that your truth is soft, that your soul bends for proximity. And no one, not even the most wounded woman, admires a man who disappears just to be kept. Zeno of Citium, the father of Stoicism, didn't win respect by being agreeable. He didn't become wise by smiling through pain or nodding through loss. He became who he was after losing everything, after the shipwreck that stripped him of wealth, comfort, and illusion. He didn't chase comfort. He became precise. He studied in silence. He rebuilt, not by becoming palatable, but by becoming anchored. Zeno didn't teach through persuasion. He taught through presence. That's the difference. Seneca once said, "He who is everywhere is nowhere." And that's the trap of the nice man. He gives so much of himself, he has no center left. He floods the room with yeses and agreeable smiles, but he never brings edge, never brings weight, never brings spine. So he dissolves. Not in rage, not in fire, but in polite erosion. And when she pulls away, he doesn't even know why, because he was there for everything, except himself. The truth is, you weren't too nice. You were too invisible. You erased yourself in the name of peace. You confused silence with safety. You confused pleasing with love. But Stoicism isn't coldness, it's clarity. It's presence without apology. It's being the man who stands still, even if it means standing alone. Not louder, just unmoved. Not cruel, just unshakable. The kind of man who can love without disappearing. This isn't a call to become hard. It's a call to become honest. Honest in your no, honest in your stillness, honest in your presence. It's not about taking more space. It's about taking your place, fully, silently, without permission. Because the truth is, nice might open the door, but only presence keeps you in the room. And presence begins the moment you stop apologizing for existing. It didn't start in your last relationship. It started long before. Maybe as a boy, maybe as a teenager, maybe as a son in a house where love had conditions. Somewhere along the way, you learned that being chosen meant being useful. That affection came when you fixed things, when you didn't make noise, when you kept the peace. So you became agreeable, helpful, quiet. You made yourself easy to love by becoming easy to ignore. This niceness, this urge to accommodate, isn't kindness. It's survival. It's the echo of emotional abandonment, when love felt like a reward, not a home. And now, even as a grown man, you keep reaching for it the same way, through favors, through soft words, through never asking for too much, hoping she'll notice, hoping that if you keep giving, she'll finally see you. But she doesn't, because there's nothing left to see. The truth is, men who always say yes are remembered last. They're the ones who stay when they should go, who agree when they should disagree, who listen but never speak. And not because they're weak, but because they were never taught how to protect their own truth. They fear rejection so deeply, they accept invisibility as safety. But safety at the cost of self-respect is slow self-erasure. It's not survival. It's surrender. There's science behind it, sure. Trauma responses, fawning, the nervous system choosing appeasement over conflict. But no theory will help you if you don't see what it's doing to your soul. You're not being good. You're disappearing. You're trading who you are for the illusion of closeness. And each time you do, you confirm the lie that you're only worthy when you're soft, silent, and small. The worst part? That niceness doesn't even protect you. It invites quiet disrespect. Because when you don't stand for anything, when you say yes just to stay, the world forgets how to see you. And so does she. Stoic masculinity doesn't demand love. It doesn't perform. It simply is. Unmoved, present, honest. You want her respect? Start by respecting your own edges. Start by making peace with the truth. You were not born to please. You were born to be. At first, she appreciates it. The way you always say yes. The way you make things easy. The way you avoid conflict and keep the mood light. But over time, something shifts. Not in what you do, but in how she sees it. Because she begins to feel what you won't say. The things you hold back. The words you swallow. The resentment you pretend isn't there. And slowly, your niceness stops feeling like love. It starts feeling like performance. You think you're holding the relationship together by agreeing, adapting, adjusting. But what you're really doing is hiding, smiling through things that hurt you, saying, "I'm fine," when you're not, staying quiet when something inside you wants to speak. And in doing that, you teach her to question your truth, because no one is that agreeable without cost. She feels the split in you, the man who stays soft on the outside, while something cold and silent builds underneath. The irony is that the more you accommodate, the less she feels you. Not physically, emotionally. Because niceness, when used to avoid friction, becomes a mask, and masks create distance. She doesn't know where you stand, because you never take a stand. She doesn't trust your yes, because you never offer a no. And in that uncertainty, something dies. Not suddenly, but slowly. One moment of dishonesty at a time. You think you're avoiding conflict, but what you're really avoiding is yourself. And that avoidance rots the foundation. It makes you a stranger in your own home. She might not say it, but she starts to pull back. Not because you did something wrong, but because you stopped being someone real. And in the end, she doesn't leave the man. She leaves the absence, the lack of spine, the softness that never made her feel safe. Stoic masculinity doesn't mean being harsh. It means being whole. It means choosing clarity over comfort, speaking when it matters, saying no without cruelty, disagreeing without aggression, stillness with weight, presence with edge, not to dominate, but to anchor. A woman may admire your kindness, but she only respects your clarity. And without respect, love becomes a performance both of you grow tired of pretending to enjoy. It didn't happen all at once. It never does. It began in the small moments. The way you looked down instead of holding her gaze. The way you nodded, even when something inside you whispered no. The way you paused before speaking, then stayed silent just to keep the peace. You thought you were being kind. What you were being was erased, inch by inch, gesture by gesture, until one day you were still there, but she couldn't feel you anymore. She stopped feeling you, not because you stopped loving her, but because you stopped showing her the man, not the provider, not the helper, the man, the one with opinions, the one with principles, the one with boundaries. She missed the edge in your voice, the pause that meant presence, the fire that didn't burn, but warmed, and in its place she found softness without structure, a warmth that never stood still, a man who agreed with everything and belonged to nothing. You thought you were preserving the relationship, that if you just kept it calm, kept it steady, avoided the difficult conversations, you'd protect what you had. But you weren't protecting the relationship. You were protecting yourself from rejection. And in doing so, you became less real, less rooted, less felt. You were so focused on being kept, you forgot to be seen. And when a man stops being seen, a woman starts to drift. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." But instead of being, you performed. You tried to be liked. You tried to be safe. You tried to be everything she might need. Except present, because real presence requires risk. It requires saying what you mean, holding your ground, disagreeing with calm, loving without losing shape. But you didn't risk that. You stayed agreeable, and in that agreement, you slowly disappeared. You didn't need her approval. You needed your truth, not to be defended, but to be inhabited, not to win her back, but to remember yourself. Because the man she once admired wasn't perfect. He wasn't polished. He was simply there, unapologetically, fully, stoically. And when that presence faded, so did the connection. Not out of hate, but out of absence. Not because you failed, but because you stopped being felt. Masculine energy doesn't exist to please. It exists to define. It doesn't flow in every direction. It holds. It shapes. It anchors. And when a man loses that structure in himself, when he starts saying yes just to avoid tension, just to be liked, just to maintain peace, he becomes formless. He stops being a presence and becomes a performance. and no matter how gentle his intentions, that absence is felt more deeply than any argument ever could be. She doesn't pull away because you're kind. She pulls away because your kindness lacks edge, because your yes never stands beside a no, because your giving never pauses. And without that pause, there's no boundary. And without a boundary, there's no gravity. And without gravity, there's nothing to hold her. No direction, no weight, no shape to trust. You become soft in every place she once leaned on. Approval feels good in the moment, but it's empty if it costs you your voice. Every time you nod instead of speak, every time you yield instead of pause, you lose a layer of presence. Until eventually, what she's responding to isn't you, it's your avoidance. The absence of friction doesn't create connection. It creates confusion, because she can feel something's missing. And most of the time it's you. Boundaries don't push people away. They show people where you are. And a man who has no edges becomes impossible to hold. She may stay physically close, but emotionally, she's wandering. Not because she doesn't want you, but because she can't feel where you end and she begins. Boundaries aren't about walls, they're about presence. Quiet, still, undeniable presence. Learn to pause. Before agreeing, before explaining, before softening too quickly. That pause, that silence, is often your boundary. Not a rejection, not a punishment, just a signal that you exist, that you're not just nice, you're real. And in that stillness, something shifts. Respect grows, attraction deepens. Not because you became harder, but because you finally became whole. Disagreement isn't disrespect, it's definition. It's a line drawn not to divide, but to reveal where you stand. When a man refuses to disagree, not because he understands, but because he's afraid to disturb the peace, he doesn't protect the relationship, he weakens it. He turns love into a script and himself into a shadow. And what he calls harmony is often just the absence of himself in the room. You think avoiding conflict is mature, you think staying quiet is noble. But silence, when rooted in fear, is not strength. It's suppression. And over time, it breeds something far worse than arguments. It breeds disconnection. Because no woman wants a man who vanishes in softness. She may say she wants peace, but what she craves is presence. And presence doesn't mean pleasing. It means being. When you never disagree, you're not proving love. You're proving that your truth costs too much to share. And that message doesn't stay hidden. She hears it, not in your words, but in your silence. Not in your absence, but in your constant yielding. And slowly, you become emotionally irrelevant. You're there, but nothing in you reaches her anymore. Zeno taught that harmony isn't sameness, it's tension, balanced with structure. Masculine presence doesn't eliminate friction. It contains it, holds it, shapes it. It says, we don't have to agree, but I'm still here, unmoved. That's what builds safety. That's what creates respect. Not a man who bends with every breeze, but one who stands when the wind rises. You may think that peace means never raising a challenge, but in love, peace without truth is just performance. It doesn't deepen intimacy, it dilutes it. She doesn't need you to argue. She needs to feel you. And sometimes that means disagreeing, calmly, firmly, without needing to win, just to show that there's still something inside you that refuses to vanish. Something real, something rooted, something she can trust, even in silence. It sounds harsh, but it's true. Being nice can become a form of control, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. When a man gives endlessly, sacrifices quietly, and avoids tension in the name of love, he starts to expect something in return. Gratitude, loyalty, a sense of security. And when that doesn't come, he grows resentful. Not because he gave, but because his giving was conditional, even if he didn't realize it. Niceness becomes a silent negotiation. You offer peace, hoping she'll stay. You suppress your needs, expecting her to feel indebted. You disappear piece by piece, thinking she'll one day see it all and love you more for it. But that's not love, that's emotional bargaining. And eventually the weight of what's unspoken turns your gentleness into pressure. A quiet pressure that says, I gave up everything. Now give me back something that makes it all worth it. That's not devotion, that's debt. And no one, not even someone who loves you, wants to feel emotionally indebted to the person they're supposed to be safe with. The moment love becomes currency, it loses its sanctity. You stop loving freely. You start counting, measuring, hoping. And every unmet expectation deepens the wound that says, I gave everything, and it still wasn't enough. Epictetus reminds us, you only control your choices, not their outcome. You can give, you can love, you can show up fully, but the moment you attach your worth to her response, you've handed over your freedom. You've made her behavior the judge of your value. And in doing so, you've chained yourself to something you can never truly hold. Masculine freedom begins when you stop trying to be owed, when you love without asking, when you give without disappearing, when you show up not to be praised, but because that's who you are. That's what it means to be whole, not waiting, not pleasing, not bargaining, just being. Clear, calm, centered, without needing applause, without needing return, because real strength doesn't trade. It simply stands and lets everything else reveal itself around it. Love is not about being liked. It's not about being agreeable. It's not about staying small so someone else can feel big. Love, at its most grounded, is presence, not noise, not performance, not over-explanation, just presence, the kind that doesn't bend to be accepted, doesn't shrink to be understood. It simply is, and in that stillness, it commands more than affection. It commands respect. You don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You don't need to defend your space to deserve it. Sometimes the most powerful thing a man can do is stand still, not to punish, not to prove a point, but to remember himself, to remember that his needs matter, that his limits mean something, that his soul deserves room to breathe. And the moment you stop apologizing for needing space, something sacred happens. You return to yourself. She may not understand it at first. The shift, the silence, the refusal to explain every decision. But in time, if she's meant to walk with you, she'll feel it. The difference between a man who performs love and a man who holds it. The difference between a man who fears conflict and a man who carries calm. She may challenge it, she may test it, but deep down, she'll trust it, because it's real, it's felt. It doesn't vanish when things get hard. You don't need to be softer. You need to be stiller, not reactive, rooted, not agreeable, clear. And in that clarity, you stop chasing being liked. You start inviting something deeper, being respected, not out of pride, but out of truth. Because the man who replaces nice with clear, soft with still, and liked with respected, doesn't lose love. He redefines it. Zeno's final lesson wasn't spoken, it was lived. After losing everything, he didn't become a martyr. He became precise, calm, unmoved. Because love without self is just charity, and no woman, no matter how wounded, truly admires a man who makes himself small in the name of being kept. The man she remembers is the one who stood, who didn't chase, who didn't beg, who didn't need to be louder, just no longer lesser. You weren't wrong to love. You weren't wrong to care. What broke you wasn't your heart. It was the quiet way you erased yourself to protect hers, the way you stayed soft when you needed to be still, the way you gave, not because it felt right, but because you were afraid that if you stopped, you'd be forgotten. But you were never meant to be forgotten. You were meant to be felt. Zeno of Citium lost everything, his ship, his wealth, his certainty, but he didn't trade his presence for comfort. He didn't sell his soul to be liked again. He walked through Athens in silence, not out of shame, but precision. He didn't need to prove his worth. He became it, and you can do the same. Not by becoming cold, not by building walls, but by remembering the one thing no one can give you, your own weight. Marcus Aurelius said, "Don't be overheard complaining, not even to yourself." That's not a rule, that's a practice. Because the man who complains about not being seen has already forgotten how to stand. Your job is not to be liked. It is not to be praised. It is to be true, quietly, consistently, without apology, without demand. Picture this, a man standing in a room where he used to bend, where he used to explain, where he used to make himself small just to avoid the storm. But now, he's unmoved, not louder, just clearer, not harder, just present. The room hasn't changed, but he has. And for the first time in years, he feels it. The stillness, the weight, the respect. Not from her, from himself. Niceness may open doors, but only presence keeps you in the room. You don't need to be less. You don't need to be more. You just need to be whole. And when you are, you won't have to chase love. You'll attract it. Not because you pleased everyone, but because you finally stopped disappearing.